Hello and welcome to the Kamla Show. We bring you interviews and conversations with technologists, entrepreneurs, filmmakers, and other news from in and around the San Francisco Bay Area. And my guest today is Kiran Malhotra. She is a member of Fenwick West, and you are the director of VC Relationships.
That's right.
What does that mean?
That's a good question, Kamla. I guess a 30,000-foot view of what that means is I work with our startup practice to maintain and expand our venture capital relationships. And why do we do that? Because as a startup practice, you have to have a very large pipeline of we want the most quality startups possible. And we think that the most quality startups are probably venture-backed early-stage startups. And so in order to get those, we would like to stay in front of those venture capital firms so that they think of Fenwick West when they're thinking of recommending legal counsel to their startup companies.
So it's an unusual company, Fenwick West, because it focuses on startups and tech companies.
That's correct. That's right. We are a tech-focused firm, not just on startups, but we have a practice that sort of goes the gamut all the way to later stage companies, anyone that has a liquidity event, like a merger acquisition or an IPO, and we represent public companies. So we run the gamut from soup to nuts.
Soup to nuts. What are some of the big names that are associated with Fenwick West? Uber is one?
Uber, we just did the GoPro IPO, we just did Lending Club. You might have heard of Facebook.
No, I don't think I have, no.
A little company called Facebook we did.
Yeah, it started somewhere in Palo Alto.
Yeah, somewhere like that, you know, that little social media company. So we've got a list, a blue chip list of clients.
So it's a well-established law firm with all the practices that you mentioned. You said you work with VC-backed companies. What is your day like? What do you do?
That's kind of a loaded question. Yes, some of them are VC-backed. Many of them are not. Many of the companies that come to me for my help or to our attorneys for our help is that they want to be connected to venture capital. So they're starting out, they're very early stage companies, they want those VC connections. And one of the things that Fenwick offers is not just excellent legal service, right? We sort of offer that whole venture capital services too, as far as, okay, you're looking for a seed funding, or you're looking for angel funding, or you're looking for a Series A funding. How do we strategize around that? Who is investing in your space? Which VCs have invested in your industry in a similar company? Who do we know that we may be able to make a warm intro to?
And warm intros matter.
I think warm intros are always good, you know, in venture capital or anywhere, right? Even in personal relationships, you'll sort of look at a warm intro differently than a cold intro, right? So when we take on a client, we really want to provide them with legal and business services to the best of our ability.
So again, the Valley law firms are very unusual. They're just not law firms, but they also have this relationship which you're part of, nurturing that relationship. Do you work within the law firm also in terms of building the relationship?
Yes, a big part of my role is working internally with our startup group. We have about 30 attorneys that have very thriving startup practices, and there's a lot going on. And you know, when people are working with their clients and their companies, and they don't necessarily have the time or know, you know, all the time what their partners are doing or what the associates are doing, unless they're working directly with them on a deal. And so one of the things that I do as far as looking at our venture capital relationships is sort of going, okay, here's where all of our relationships are, sort of like a relationship map, and saying, okay, here's where some of the activity is. This partner had coffee with so-and-so VC from this firm, and did you know that this person also had lunch with them 2 weeks ago? Just so that it's sort of a knowledge management piece, but also strategy piece. It's like, okay, well, we know 6 people at Excel Partners or something like that. I'm just picking a name. Who else do we want to know there? Do we want to branch out? What are they investing in? Are they investing in software and mobile? Do we know people in their digital health? We know a lot of people in software. We want to expand into X industry. You know what? Let's think about how we want to go about meeting the VCs in the same firm, but they're working on different industry. So there's sort of the internal piece is connecting the dots and also looking at strategy as far as how we want to move forward our venture capital relationships.
So you must have seen some very interesting trends in the past couple of years since you joined Fenwick and West. What was last year like for the venture capital company?
Are you talking about venture funds or venture backed or both?
For both. I have some numbers here, but
Yeah.
which you shared with me. So I was just wondering if you could tell me how much money was invested and what does that
Absolutely.
mean? What are the trends?
Yep. Last year was a banner year, particularly after the slump. It sort of kind of came back to life around 2012, 2013 picked up. Last year was a banner year by many standards. I mean, we haven't seen numbers like this since maybe 2001, that first dot-com area. But as far as venture funds, almost 30 billion was raised in venture funds. I mean, that's how much capital they raised. Almost 50 billion was invested in companies last year in 2014.
Across the country?
Across it, yeah, this is U.S. This is the NVCA Pricewaterhouse Money Tree Survey, which is, they've been doing this for 20 years. Software had the biggest investment. It usually does. Usually software is the biggest sort of piece of that pie, followed by some of the other industry. But even last year, software took up about 40% of the investment dollars, which was the highest number they recorded since the start of the Money Tree report. And then internet sort of took up a big chunk of that too, with almost 12 billion invested in internet companies.
So internet is social media. Where does social media fit in?
It's sort of, a lot of these industries can kind of cross over. They can be an internet software company, sort of, it depends on what metrics they're using. If you look at the study a little bit more in detail, you can see what sort of things that they determine as an internet company. Software is very broad, but usually when you're looking at any year, software dollars usually take up the most venture dollars.
So software, internet, and then?
Then you've got biotech. Biotech sort of really went on the tear last year as well. And then you've got sort of the other industries, right? You've got medical devices, you've got mobile, you've got, and some of the tech trends that emerged last year and maybe the last couple of years, security, anything that's sort of software enterprise related or mobile enterprise related, the marketplace like Uber or Airbnb, those sort of interactive marketplace sorts of
Or
companies.
collaborative economy, as they're
Yeah,
known
the
as.
collaborative economies. And the interesting thing about last year too was that, you saw the venture capital world is sort of shifting a little bit, right?
In what way?
There are more players entering at an earlier level, even though seed funding was a little bit down last year. There's more players entering at an early level, or they're crowdfunding, or there's more micro VCs popping up. When I say micro VC, I mean people that have started funds that are sort of $50 million or $30 million seed funds, and they're writing maybe $1 million check or even less. To say, hey, you know what? Here's some seed money. Go out and find your customers and get some traction, and then show us that there's a market for this. On the opposite end, private equity also took, a huge role this year, and we saw last year, for the first time, a couple of $1 billion financings, right? And about 30 or 40, $100 million mega financings. So that is something that's sort of new. It doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal now when you talk about a $1 billion company, right? But 10 years ago, that was, or even a few years ago, it was sort of, $1 billion company. Wow, now you're like, oh, $10 billion, okay.
Yeah.
Now we're talking, right?
Yeah, the valuations are through the roof.
They're amazing.
So how do you correct for it when you're doing your research and when you're looking? What challenges do you have when you get up in the morning and do your reading and preparing for the day?
I think the biggest challenge is to sift through. There's so many reports. I mean, there were conflicting reports about seed funding going up and seed funding going down.
That was my question,
right?
actually. Yes.
Yeah. So you sort of go, okay, well, it really is dependent on methodology, I think, and what set of research they're looking at. So maybe they're both right to a certain degree. So one is sort of sifting through all the data points and, sort of going, okay, well, according to NVCA, this is the data point. According to PitchBook, this is the data point. According to whatever, it's a different data point. So sifting through that and coming up with some kind of intelligent.
So do you have an Excel spreadsheet or something? How do you figure out these metrics?
I don't keep it to that degree. What I do is I take it and I sort of disseminate the information to our partners or internally. I put together what I call a tech check, because they can't possibly go through all that information, right? So I go, okay, these are the biggest things that happened this week in venture capital. Here's a few tech trends that you should know about. And then I send it to them. And if they have questions, I sort of go, okay, this is based on this report. Here's the report. And these are the metrics they used. So, and you can, we
So you're constantly refining it.
Constantly refining it. And we have a library team internally where we have access to databases. And I go, can you slice and dice it this way? What does it look like?
So that's how you get your information.
So you know how data is.
Okay. What are some of you didn't mention Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is another trend. Yes, you're right. Bitcoin is we'll see what happens with Bitcoin, because I think there's been a lot more funding in Bitcoin these days. It's been sort of validated by some of the bigger VCs. So we'll see. It's an alternative. There's like anything else, there's opinions on both sides of the Bitcoin argument.
Do you get to meet these young startups who are looking for money?
Yes, I do.
And what strikes you? How do you, when you look at a team like that, what is it that you look for?
Well, I think I'm a little bit more biased, only because by the time I see them, they're already clients, so I already think they're great.
Oh.
I used to do a little bit more sort of taking the cold calls, but because we have sort of a different group to deal with that now, I don't see so many cold calls. So I do see clients that are already, or I see startups that are already our clients. And what I look for when they send me their executive summary or something like that is I look for their team. This is what VCs will say. When you read about what they're looking for, you want to look for the team that is experienced to do that. How well suited are they for this particular startup that they're doing? Do they know each other? Are they, do they fit together? Are they passionate?
But doesn't it work against young folks that may not have that experience, but they may be passionate?
Yeah.
There's the other side of the coin.
There's always the other side of the coin. I think a lot of it, and you will talk to many VCs who have said, yeah, we passed on that company, and suddenly it's an Uber, right? So it's not an exact science. It's sort of like it's a risk. It's always a risk. There's probably more failure than successes. And anybody who works in startup knows this, which is the reason why it's really important to get a large quality pipeline for us. Because even if they go through a round or two of funding, they still may not make it, right?
Because failure is pretty high.
Failure rate for startups is pretty high. And it may not be the technology is bad. It could be that the market's not ready. It could be that they don't know how to bring that particular technology to market, right? They don't have the right business people, but they have the great technology. So there's a lot of factors, I think.
How did you make a transition? You started off your professional life as a social worker.
I did back in the old days. And
I mean, you're talking as in the 1960s, back in the old days.
I just had a birthday. I'm feeling a little ripe. I still love social work. I think at the core, I think those social work skills help me when I'm talking to empathy, active listening skills, sort of understanding what they're saying or not saying.
So you listen for the unsaid?
Yeah, or body language, those kinds of things. And that's how I'm able to assist the attorney in the startup sometimes with helping them sort of strategize a plan, because sometimes they don't say things or they don't know what to ask, or those kinds of things. But so how the transition, I loved it. I did it for 10, 12 years, and I wanted a new challenge. And I also wanted more money. I mean, to be frank, I was like, I love this job. I'm associate director at this wonderful organization, but I'm going to hit a salary cap soon, and this is just not going to do it. Plus, I was sort of like, it's time to do something else. And so I just started talking to people, which is what I love to do. And a friend of mine said, hey, you know what? They're looking for a new ED at TIE, executive director at TIE.
Which is the Indus Entrepreneurs.
The Indus Entrepreneurs.
Which is the largest?
Which is the largest entrepreneurial organization, nonprofit in the world, 60 chapters now. And it's dedicated to fostering entrepreneurship. And in the Valley is the mothership chapter. So they were looking for a new executive director. And I said, what am I going to do at TIE? I mean, this is all these old Indian guys like my father who are in tech. I mean, they're just going to look at me and laugh. So he goes, no, no, no. You know what? You have the nonprofit background. They're looking to bring younger women, second generation in. I said, okay, what the hell? I'll send them my resume. They're never going to call me. They called me. I went for interview after interview after interview, and after pestering them for 3 or 4 months.
Oh, you ended up pestering them.
Yeah, I mean, they interviewed me, and then I think I met everybody on the board and past board, and then you hear. They get excited, then you don't hear from them for 2 weeks. Then you start getting nervous. So I'm like, oh, by the way, I saw this in the news, or just so that I could keep in front of them. I call it pestering. But they gave me the job, So that was in 2008.
And so you wet your feet there.
So I wet my feet there. It was a very good platform for me, coming from nonprofit and giving me visibility into tech.
Into another nonprofit.
Into another nonprofit, right. But it was a tech nonprofit, right? So our stakeholders were entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, corporate executives, law firms, all of those folks that I touched as executive director of TIE. So it was a very good platform for me to launch myself into tech.
As a single mother, what are some of the tricks that you've learned to manage your life, this work-life balance that we keep hearing about all the time? What are some of the tricks you have learned that you can share?
I have learned that you have to have a really strong support system around you. For me, at least, I wouldn't be able to do this job or the job at TIE had it not been for that strong support system. I mean, I live in the East Bay. My mom is there. My former mother-in-law is there. My ex-husband lives there. I have a network of friends. And without them, we all have a great relationship. Without them, there's no way that I could be doing this job. So that's one. I mean, I think a strong support system. Two, as hard as it is, you have to try to take a little bit of time, whether it's 5 minutes in the morning to meditate or exercise or something.
You do it?
Yes.
The me time.
The me time. This year I made a resolution to start meditation. So I get up, I'm an early riser anyways, so getting up 5 minutes earlier to do 5-minute meditation is not too difficult for me. But whatever it is,
Are you able to control your runaway thoughts?
That's another issue, Kamala. Sometimes yes and sometimes no. Sometimes,
But you're succeeding. You're trying meditation.
That's why they call it a practice, I think, because every day isn't the same, each day is not the same as the one before the next day, right? So every day is different, depends on what you ate, what was on your mind the day before, what your kids said to you, whatever, right? So today was a good day. I don't know about tomorrow because at work, I've had a whole bunch of meetings and things like that, but we'll see. We'll keep practicing.
So me time. One is you have support system, me time.
Me time. And I'm not sure sometimes if there's actually a work-life balance all the time. In fact, I'm sure that there isn't a work-life balance all the time. I mean, I don't think that in any aspect of life that we maintain balance at every single moment. So it's sort of like, that the seesaw, if you're standing in the middle, you have to be in the right position all the time, which is impossible almost, right? Because we're not perfect. So sometimes, a wind will blow and you'll go this way and you're like, oh, okay, I have to reset the balance a little bit. So we try. I try.
My last question, where do you see yourself, say, 3 to 5 years from now?
3 to 5 years from now? I actually see myself at a startup. I see myself either launching a startup, maybe 5 years from now, or at maybe a well-funded startup, because I have been around that for the last 6 years now, and it's very intoxicating, and there's a lot of ideas floating around.
So it's entered your system.
It's entered my system. God help me.
Okay. God is going to help you. Kiran, thank you so much for stopping by and talking to us today, and we wish you all the best with that intoxication.
Thank you, Kamala. It's great to be here.
And thank you for watching. You can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @Kamla, and if you missed any of our interviews, you can catch them on YouTube. Until next time, goodbye.